is absent. He's out of town. Everyone else is here. Under agenda review, I would entertain a motion where we take out 3B and 5B out of the agenda because those aren't board matters. They're part of operations and taken care of by superintendent inadvertently.
3B and
5B about the out-of-state
okay.
travel.
Yeah.
So take those two out, and otherwise the agenda as it is. So entertain a motion of such.
I move.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
I move to amend the published agenda to remove 3B and 5B.
Second.
It's been moved in second to adopt the amended agenda as published, taking out 3B and 5B. Any discussion? All those in favor, aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. Ayes have it unanimously. Adoption of the collective bargaining agreement. Tony, would this be you, I assume, would be our presenter?
Oh, yeah. Thank you, everybody. Board members, I'm pleased to present to you for review, approval, and adoption the 25-26 collective bargaining agreement between the Silver Falls School District and the Silver Falls Education Association. I attached on the agenda item both a tracked copy, which you could read through and see where all the changes were in the agreement, and also then the final copy, which if it's if the board does finally do the formal adoption tonight, I will ask Phil and Kim to sign 3 copies, so that way we have, one for the union, one for us, and then one what I call the book copy, which is the formal one that we'll collect. And I can go through it in as little or as much detail as the board likes. What I'll do is I'll introduce the different the articles that were changed, and then the basic changes within those articles, and then if board members would like to ask more specifics of it, I could. We'll mention to the board, of course, that these were tentatively agreed upon, so there was reasonable faith and assurance on the behalf of both the bargaining team and the district's bargaining team, as well as the union's bargaining team, that we would have a tentative agreement on this. So, the first article is simply a change in the members on the actual bargaining team, so that's pretty straightforward. If we move on to Article 12, that's where you see some changes that were related to the workday and the work year. And in those changes, what you see is we updated the table to align with what the calendar ultimately was. So that's why that was the last article that we were actually able to get finalized. We didn't have to have a separate meeting on it, but we needed to make sure that calendar was adopted in order to be able to actually dot the I's and cross the T's on this article. So you can see that the big changes there was that it does move for this year to the 3 full work days for professional development, and it does create the provision where at the school levels, between the principal and the staff at the school, they can decide if they want to have a 1-hour time per week for professional development. If they do, the provision allows them to be able to fit the development within the day. It may be that one day a week they need to go a little bit longer, which the provision will allow them then on the days of a few other days of the week, they could always shorten the length of the workday. However, what they can't do is affect the instructional day. So that's pretty much just, it's a lot of wording there, but really is to make sure that everybody's very clear on how that process will work. And again, we even got a request from one of the schools that says, well, do we really need to do this? We kind of already have something in place. Well, there's a provision here that says that the principal and the staff may agree to if they have an alternative in place, they can do that. So we made sure that was in there. There's also, we made sure that the building directed early release days I left it and I wanted to leave it in the language just so it's for history, but it's not applicable for this year. There's also in the teacher workday, what we did, this was another one that we had a lot of discussion on, which was the evening activities. So the union's first request was to really look at limiting to the number of those activities that the principal could require them to. After some conversation with the union and with our administrative team, we agreed that what we'll do is that at the beginning of the year, the principal has to disclose what all those activities are going to be. And then we're going to collect data throughout this year to just see, to get a better sense about how frequently and to what extent individuals who are the teachers are actually engaged in these activities.
Tony, what's an example of like an evening activity?
Okay, so an evening activities would include things like back to school nights. Some of our schools have events that are formal school adopted events. Some of those differ from what we would call like PTC events, which are a different type of an event. And now it doesn't mean the principals can't ask people to go to them, and it doesn't mean that you might have more people than just who's actually asked to go to those events that show up to them. But so the thing of the formal events is those that are really that are very specific. They have the academic connection. The other thing that we often see too is like, especially in our Title I schools, you'll often see they'll have like a reading intervention night where, you know, many teachers are used to this. And I also did, in my days as a superintendent, we also had a math intervention night at schools where we let parents come in, and the teachers actually liked it because they create little manipulatives and things to give to the teachers, to the parents to take home with them. So it's kind of pretty cool. But we wanted to make sure that we didn't limit for right now how many they could go to, but just we're going to keep track of it, and that they do have to have some notice in advance, okay? There's some other minor changes, which just to clarify that we wanted to make sure we clarified what was 9-12 teachers versus K-8 teachers. And so you'll see that several places within the agreement. That's pretty much the big changes on 12. Other than what you'll see that on section J and K, they add language on there. That language was originally in Article 19, but we felt it was more appropriate to have it within the workday language. So what it adds is the big change there is we used to give up to 3 days for language arts teachers to have release to do grading. It's increased now to 4 days. And of course, it's as available. So for instance, if there's no substitute availability on that day that they had planned, then it's not offered. Okay. It also has some provisions for caseload managers on what that looks like, but there really wasn't substantive change on that one. The big substantive change in that area was adding the 4th day for language arts teachers. The next article you'll see changes on is Article 16, which is our leave with pay provisions. The big changes there is that it looks like it's a lot of language, but really what it does, since this last agreement was put in place, there's been several changes by the legislature to what really counts as family members. Yes, it is more expansive. Okay, I will say that, but that's actually by law, so we just updated those to match that. So you'll see that in several places. Because we were very clear with that we were actually able to remove some of the redundant language in other parts of that article. It also is clear on the building ratio, so there is a provision whereby principals, if you have so many teachers who are requesting personal leave, but once you get to a certain number of people who are requesting personal leave, of course it becomes hard for us to fill with subs, but we do want to always set a limit on that. So it just clarifies that the ratio we use is to the licensed staff. So for instance, if you're at a small building and you only have 1 to 10 licensed staff, then the principal can limit it to only 1 teacher out on personal leave on that day. Bereavement leave, the change there is that we wanted to make sure that there's up to the 5 days, but we wanted to make sure that it's used within a 12-month period. We believe a 12-month period is appropriate because sometimes, depending on where people are at, they may be out of state. There are also some cases that are related to the bereavement leave. There may be some technical things that a bereaved family member may need to do, and sometimes the way our legal system works, that may not happen until 6 to 8 months or so later. So that's why we changed that. And it does give the superintendent or the designee, so Kim or I, basically the ability to then look if we have to, in certain circumstances, extend that.
Yeah, we would do that for an employee that needed that.
The same language applies on what qualifies for the sick leave bank. So that's basically Article 16. That article was actually agreed to pretty quickly. The next article, you'll see changes on our 19, which is the class size. Again, there we made clear that When we look at targets, now they're not actual formal limits on class sizes, but we do have a target system where we review the targets, and like for instance this year, with the way those numbers were set, there were 10 teachers we had that actually were eligible for what's a 1.5% stipend, because the principals try to work with them when they're above that target to provide supports, and if those supports ultimately aren't, they're not reasonably applied, or they weren't successful in it, there's a process that they can go up to. We originally thought with the challenges of this school year that we were going to see a lot more of those requests. Well, in honesty, I didn't necessarily know that I would see a whole lot more, but there was some concern from the union that there may be a lot more, so we actually waited until the end of the year to actually review all those requests, because there's a certain amount of dollars that are limited in the pool, in which case, so you can see where the worry was, right? You have 40 teachers eligible for it, instead of the money that, the 30,000 that's there, instead of a 1.5%, now you're gonna prorate it, right? But it ended up being that our principals did a pretty good job. If you only have 10 teachers with what we were going through this year, if you only have 10, it's actually 10 FTEBs. One of them is a split between 2 teachers, so it's 11 individuals in 10 teaching spots. That's not a bad thing, really. Those numbers could have been a lot worse. So it shows that the principals were doing a good job to try to provide supports and keep their class sizes spread, particularly at the high school. The middle school was the one where we saw 8 of those actually were at the middle school. So we were clear, though, that to define on the caseload that it's the specialist. So it's not like if you have an individual teacher in a special ed program who has a self-contained program, but we're talking about specialists. If they have a certain caseload or over, then they can qualify for that stipend. The classroom special education teachers would be subject to the same other limits that are there. And you can see that where that language in Article 19 was cut out. That was moved to Article 12. The last 2 big changes you're going to see are insurance and compensation. The insurance change was to move the monthly cap from $1,700 a month to $1,725 per month. There is the opt-out provision, which has been at $500 per month this year. That is increased to $550 a month for this year, or for this coming year, starting July 1.
Sorry, what was it again, Tony? It was 500?
Yes.
And this
If you
was
see in the language, you have to go read a little bit further down because
Yeah.
it tiers it by the year. So it was at the beginning of that contract, it was $400 a month. And then in the 24-25 year, that amount went up to $500 a month.
Now, I'm assuming when we put the budget together, we were expecting these, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
These numbers are actually very, as I think I mentioned in a previous meeting when I gave an update, that the union was actually fairly reasonable with this. I think with the work Kim and I did with going and meeting with them at their buildings, and from day one we were here, Kim and I presented at the COSA conference. I don't know if she's kind of thinking of going into more detail on it, but we talked about some of the changes that we did this year, and we talked about our work with the union, and we displayed a little bit of what we call professional humility in doing the work, where we just go to them and say, hey guys, this is what we're dealing with. Mm-hmm. We're in the same struggle as you are. So, we can either work apart or we can work together on these things. So that's kind of how that worked. And then the last one, of course, is the salary, which is basically, think of all the salary lines, whether it's the base salary itself, whether it's the stipends, whether it's the sub rate or the extra duty rate, those all go up by 2.5%. Which is, again, that's a good amount. And credit to the association, that the union, that even their first, when they came out, was half of what most school district unions did. Most unions were coming out at the opener 7 to 9%. A few were even higher. And then they bargained down to about 5%, 4.5%. So that was really good work for, I think, both teams and the prep work we did up front. There were 2 stipends that were added, which were the district testing coordinator and the district tag coordinator, the talented and gifted. And the other thing that I think is important to note in the public meeting setting is that we did clarify between the association and the district that when there are stipends that are split, that there is to be designated a head stipend and an assistant stipend. Once in a while, that's not been, fully followed in here, and when you do a new bargaining agreement, that's your opportunity to reaffirm what that language is. You get basically the opportunity, if there were any what we call past practice that was done, a new contract is your time to affirm that, no, past practice is done with. This is the actual written language. I will share in transparency that the one area that I can speak of where I know that has been more a practice versus what the language said was in the agriculture area. This last year, both of those advisors got the full stipend amount, when if you look at the contract language, even what was there in the previous contract, it's to be split. So that's going to be a discussion we're going to have as we start rolling over the stipends and the salary schedules. That's basically your agreement. It's 1-year agreement, and then we'll hopefully later in the fall we'll get back to it again, and this time it'll be both certified and classified. So any other questions that I can answer?
Yeah, I've got one under, and first I just appreciate everyone's work, union and the bargaining team, just to get a contract negotiated. My question's on Article 20 under tuition professional development pool. I heard time and time again our folks are really interested in trying to maintain and push that forward. My question is, if I'm looking at the dates, I want to make sure the dates are accurate, and then it says 2019 to 2022, and then since that was a 3-year pool of money, how's that play in for a 1 year?
Yeah, and that's because here's
extension?
as I understand it. Okay, there may be some people that actually I think just about all of us here are on the administrative team tonight are fairly new, but that program was really like totally revamped into this coming contract. So the one that we're just leaving. So all the things are tied and tagged to what was there then. So
Okay.
It is a unique system because the way we do it is because we have to, under their contract, Marissa Franklin and I in HR have to review how much money's left, and then there's this apportionment where if you have whatever you have left, a portion of it goes to professional development versus going to what we would call the money that we use for when people get transferred, and there's a certain type of development they can get when they're involuntarily transferred. So that's why it's all tagged back to that. Any other questions?
I have one, and this is honestly just a question about the process. So I was in Section 8, I'm just looking at academic freedom, and it just for some reason triggered in my head the instructional materials policy. And I was like, I've started thinking about policy in general and contracts. And are they congruent, or are they ever in conflict? Because I haven't been in these meetings, how we structure like contracts.
Yeah.
I was like, this would be the complexity I would see, trying to source all your documents so they actually are meshing, like we see with our student handbook versus what we see with our policy. They're not exactly the same.
Yep.
So I would assume that's an incredible difficulty, and is that something we look at when we're?
Yes,
Okay.
it is, and that's why you always have the primacy and supremacy, clauses, and that. So the bottom line is we all know on a dispositive item that is directly related, if it's related to a federal constitutional piece, that's going to always trump whatever's in a contract. Then you look at the state level, which is what you're referring to, Josh, because I know you and I kind of conversed that there was, if you don't know that, the governor's now signing the bill that was the instructional materials bill. We had worked on being ready to give to you in the first July meeting. We were looking at giving you the updated work the policy committee had done. Now there's going to need to be a little bit of changes because actually in that bill, it actually removes a little bit more of the board authority on it. The only people who can really file a request to have the book just removed now would be a parent of a student in the district or a district employee. Not an administrator, an employee. So, so more to come on that. But it really speaks to Josh's point. So when you see academic freedom, they're almost in all contracts. These are really something that came out of the higher education area, where they do tend to have a lot more academic freedom. When you see these clauses in a K-12 contract, it's really as much a statement about our intention is to believe that faculty are the experts in their classroom and they have the ability and the responsibility to do this work. However, there are so many state laws that provide limits on what your curriculum is, what specific standards you have to teach to, even methodology sometimes, that the academic freedom when you see in a teacher's contract is really what I call academic light, because there's so much other rules and policies that kind of limit that freedom.
Yeah, some of those are on Division 22, you know, when you talk about curriculum adoption and materials and instructional materials, like those are governed by ODE and their parameters around, you know, instructional adoption of materials, and, you know, they have to meet their parameters. That's, you know, it's like, that's why we have people that are sometimes a little hesitant to accept that type of adoption, because it's not a product that they would maybe use themselves to teach their own kids. It's a little too, how do I want to say? It just doesn't match their beliefs or their policy or their political affiliation or any of that. And so sometimes, you know, that's where we run into issues where, you know, we have to make sure that we're providing opt-outs and different things for folks that don't want their student to have that type of material. So there are other ways around it. And handbook, so for the handbook, like those have not had a like complete overhaul in a while, and those will have an overhaul this summer based on the OSBA like sample that they send us. And so Debbie receives that sample, and then we will go through both the student handbook and the staff handbook and try and align all those so that they match better. And we are also creating an athletic handbook that corresponds, instead of just having the athletic code of conduct inside the student handbook, we're going to have a more thorough athletic handbook that is a complete picture of that.
It just seemed like a lot of work to try to match, like we have a grievance policy for board and then try to put into their contract everything down the line. It just seems like it'd be a very tough task. So
It is hard to get it all aligned, yes. Yeah.
It takes usually a few months to get them done. So Kim will be working on one side of it, you know, the academic side, and then we'll be working in my office on the staff side of it, updating those handbooks.
looks good.
Okay, any other questions? Hearing none, then I will, when it comes up to action, I'll recommend your approval and adoption.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, Tony. Okay, Bethany Charter School contract.
Yeah, so you have the latest and greatest contract in your packet. And this includes a few things that we tidied up with Bethany. So we had them come to a meeting and we worked on some different parts of the contract that were unclear because we don't have a current purchase contract with them, but they might be interested in that someday in the future. And so they added some language that we were kind of like, well, that doesn't totally apply. And so we changed a couple of things so that it would be more accurate. So I'm just going to go through a couple of those changes with you real quickly, if that's okay. So when you're on page 15, there's a major shift in the language that I want to show you real quick. 15. So it's kind of in the middle of the page. So this is driven by the need to have some extra precautions when we're talking about operational and hiring authority and different things. So this is it's a clearer policy than we've had previously. So it says any decisions to hire, terminate, non-renew, or discipline and a BCS employee shall be disclosed to the district within 5 business days as provided in section 12 or as directed by the district. Any subsequent notification to the impacted employee will be 48 hours after notification to the district. So because of our PACE insurance policy, when we are working with an employee, like if it's a termination situation, non-renewal, any of those types of things, that requires notification to PACE in advance. And so this requires Bethany to notify us if they're doing that so that we can notify PACE so that, you know, everyone's on the same page. Because if PACE is not notified and there's an issue with illegal termination or any type of lawsuit, then they don't waive the $25,000 deductible. And so if we notify them and give proper notice and they read through our information like, yep, that makes sense, then they waive that deductible if there's an issue. So that is to cover that.
And I'm assuming the same thing was added for the community roots.
Yes,
as well.
exactly, yeah, there's a couple of additions to their contract as well. We cleaned up a couple of dates there. These are just small choices, or small changes, so BCS has control of its employees, but subject to the requirements of Section 8. That was on page 18, that's a small change. There's a couple of those, another one on 19. On page 19, kind of in the middle, under employee records, any records relating to the termination, non-renewal, or discipline of a Bethany Charter School employee shall be provided to the district within 72 hours. Immediately, we thought it, when Bethany read this, we're like, well, it really should have a time parameter to it, and we agree. So, and so that would be the document, you know, they would submit those to the district. Unless our insurance carrier said, hey, we need those faster than that, and then we would request them faster than that. Employee conduct. Should BCS and the district policies and regulations be in conflict with one another, the policies and regulations of Silver Falls School District shall control. It's on page 20. 21 is a small change. And then the last major change, other than a couple of dates on page 30, is we added a clause towards the end of the lease to you know, in the event that they might want to purchase the property. So we said if the parties enter into a contracted purchase agreement for the real property at 11824 Hazel Green Road, Silverton, Oregon, or to changes regarding fiscal management or payroll, an MOU or additional contract change may be required and must be agreed upon by both parties. So the reason they asked us to add that was because, like, if they purchased the property and they decided to do their own payroll or their own fiscal management or something of that sort, that is an extra cost for them. And so then at that point we would have to renegotiate the amount that the district is paid from their AD&W. So, any questions on that?
We good? Looks like it.
Moving on.
Okay.
Okay.
Go on to community roots.
Community
then.
roots, okay. So we also met with Community Roots and went over their contract as well. The effective date, after your feedback, so some of you gave me feedback by email, and you really wanted to stay with a 5-year contract. You didn't care for the rolling clause. So if that is the will of the board, that is what I proposed here based on feedback I received from some of you. If that's different or you would like me to do something different, then please, you know, let me know. But that was what I gleaned from what you guys shared. So it's just a regular 5-year term. And that's how that's normal for a charter school, is a 5-year term. We did a couple other changes here. Some of this is just tidying up, you know, little grammatical errors and such. Okay, so under the calendar section, which is under O, instruction for community roots school year shall follow the district school calendar if possible. But if days do not align, the district is not responsible for food service or transportation on days that do not match the district calendar. Community roots shall have the authority to determine makeup days due to inclement weather, independent from the district. However, transportation and busing will follow the district's calendar. Community roots will have regular school attendance Monday through Friday each week of the school year. So we adjusted that a little bit because there were some times when we were transporting community roots students when we didn't have students in the district. And so we felt that, you know, it makes sense to kind of follow the same program. And they were okay with that change. I'm trying to see. There's a couple small things. They have the same, you know, language about decision to terminate, hire, or non-renew. So that is similar, and it's under. I think it's under 8.
So operational powers.
Yeah, it's under the operational section, yeah. And I will have Debbie, there's no pages on this contract, so I will
No,
have
it's
Debbie
just-
add, yeah, I will have Debbie add pages because it's really hard to navigate without that. This is a very old contract, this document's like 20 years old, so I went through it and cleaned it up a lot, but.
I have a question real quick, because
Yeah.
it's just a big difference I saw between the two contracts was like the availability of funds and how it looks like we're releasing on certain dates a percentage, like August 15th, 16.67. I'm just curious if that's what we also do for Bethany and it's just not in their contract. It just kind of threw me off because they're so different.
It's such a great question. And our friend Kim Dowd is not here right now to
Oh,
answer that.
it's just, I mean, oh, no big deal.
Yeah.
It's kind of stood out. It's like, I should have caught it last time, so I apologize.
Well, there's also a slight difference in the, you know, in the,
I saw that, yeah.
yeah, and the payment amount too, yeah. 1% difference. So,
But they
yeah,
had
there are a
negotiated
couple
that.
And some of your board members your new board members have reached out with a couple of questions after reading this board packet
Mm-hmm.
because it, you know, we did a lot of work. I mean, these contracts have had a lot of work. We've gone back and
Mm-hmm.
forth. We've met with Bethany a couple times. We've met with Kathy Frank. We've met, you know, with the community roots people. And there's been several adjustments to make sure that they are how we want them moving forward. The attorney has looked at them, so.
I suspect why they aren't, you know, paragraph the same is because the two schools came online at different times.
Mhm.
So
They
were
did,
writ-
yeah.
The originals were written at different times, so.
They were.
Over the course of time, that original's just been modified.
Just been modified. The original
both
with
cases.
Bethany, I believe, was written with OSBA, right? You remember that?
The original was written by Craig Rossler and myself, and then Craig ran it through the attorney at that time.
Okay, so then that might be Community Roots was written, one of them was written by OSBA.
Our last.
The last iteration.
OSBA mediated between district and Bethany.
Okay.
And dealt with that. I think they might have done it with Community Roots as well, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah, so I don't know all the history on how they,
Yeah.
you know, got to this stage, but they definitely have been around for a while. And Michael Blade, which is our attorney through the ESD, has been completely through both of these contracts, and he recommended those HR adjustments to fit more in line with what we have to do with PACE to make sure that we don't lose that deductible reduction if we need it.
No worries. Just curious.
Yeah, the employee records, employee conduct, those are the same as Bethany's. And this is a tiny bit different because Community Roots is a Montessori school, so it has a few Montessori type things in it. I will tell you though that for Community Roots to get the literacy grant from ODE, they're going to have to adopt a ELA curriculum that's approved by ODE. So they currently are using a Montessori curriculum that's not on ODE's list. So ODE's like, can you adopt? And so they can adopt the same thing we have. We have some extra in the back. So, I think this has less changes than the other ones. So I think that's about it. Any questions on that?
Very good on that. Okay, Community Transitions Program location.
Yeah, so this is a complicated topic, and we really try. I want to preface this statement by saying that, you know, we really thought long and hard about everything we could do to maximize our funding in the district, and with the caveat that we protect programs for students, and we take great care of our students. So everything we do in the district is student focused, and so any considerations we give for like moving students or doing any of that type of adjustment, it's really important that it be student focused. So I just want that out there because I think it's important to note. We had a lease agreement. We have a current lease agreement with the Methodist Church right now, and it's about $3,000 a month. And we had a building on district property We still have the building.
They're magically
The
disappearing.
building is still there. And it houses the daycare. And so we thought, well, could we maybe move the community transition program to the daycare to eliminate that lease fee every month? And so Brandon and I went and looked at the daycare, and then we decided that we would try and make it work. And so we were in the middle of planning for adjustments, because in order to use the daycare, the main bathroom as you first, I don't know if you've ever been in that building, but the main bathroom when you first walk in the front door, it would require for ADA compliance, for wheelchair access and for use of a Hoyer lift and different things for students. It would require that room to have a pretty major upgrade. It needs the door widened, it needs some stalls removed, it needs a toilet replaced to an adult style toilet, not a tiny toilet. They have little baby toilets right now for the littles. And so there's a fair amount of work that, it's maybe $10,000 worth of work. It might need a permit. I don't know if that's a load-bearing wall, so it's got some complications. And so, but we decided that it would be better to pay $10,000 now, fix it, be on our own property, and try and get, some of these programs back onto the district property, because it's expensive. We have a lease for Sequoia, although that's covered by a grant now. But that is an expensive endeavor when we have people off campus. And so we met, we talked a lot about it, and we notified the Methodist Church by law, like we had to in writing, that we were going to end our lease at the end of the year, and that we really appreciated their partnership. And that is true. Pastor Laura is really a wonderful partner. She has a great relationship with the staff there. But this was part of our restructuring so that we could be more financially responsible and not continue to spend additional funds that we don't really need to. So we decided we were going to bring them back onto the property and utilize that daycare property and move the daycare either to Robert Frost or Mark Twain, and we thought Robert Frost initially. Well, Rachel Ayers, who is one of our SFED coordinators, she didn't love the configuration of the restroom, and so she kind of started looking around to see if there was another property that might fit us better. And she kind of stumbled onto the Trinity Lutheran Church, and they were open to letting us use the property in a similar fashion to how we use the Methodist Church. So the Methodist Church, we use the common area, we use the fireside room, we use the kitchen. I mean, we have a variety of areas that we use in that building. And the Trinity Lutheran Church is similar. So when Tony and I went and looked at it, we've looked at both properties. Well, we looked at all three, actually, with a lens for, what's best for kids. The two church properties allow the kids to be downtown where they're close to, because this is community transitions where the kids are going out into the community, they're selling things, they're working, they're doing a variety of things in the community. It's really an active program. And so having them be downtown is actually advantageous. Having them over here means we're going to have to transport them a little bit back and forth off the high school property. So we went and looked at the Lutheran Church. It is ADA compliant. Like, we have a student that's in a wheelchair. It has everything that student would need to move around in the common areas and everything. And it does fit the parameters of the program. And so we're just really looking for some feedback tonight from you. That property, they would like us to pay some monthly utilities of about $400. So it would be a slight adjustment to our budget, because I didn't have that in the budget because we were coming back to the daycare program, although I had some construction in there, so it's kind of a wash. The Methodist Church has asked us to stay, but they took a long time to communicate that to us. So we went several months after we had mentioned to them that we weren't going to continue the lease anymore, and they didn't reach out. We did that on March 29th, and they didn't reach out to us till the end of May 30th, somewhere in there. And so there was a long period of time, so we didn't know that they would like us to stay. And so they have offered, but there is nothing in writing about what the actual rent amount would be. And so we have a written agreement with the Trinity Lutheran Church that we have not signed yet, but it says, it has a cap of $400 a month for utilities. The other one says, you know, we could work out an agreement, you know, there's nothing in stone with the Methodist amount. It would be free for a while, and then it might go back to what it was, or, you know, some other amount. So there's really nothing concrete about that, which as a business person, that worries me a little bit. So I just wanted you to know that we didn't rashly make that decision. We really tried to think about that, and I just wanted to take some feedback from you, because you know way more about the community and our district than Tony and I know at this date, and so just trying to get some discussion on this.
Well, I think one caveat is with that 2-month hiatus of not getting back to us when we're trying to figure things out, plays into it. And has anybody done any ballpark figuring of like man hours or expense it would require for us doing the physically moving of our stuff from the Methodist Church to Trinity?
Yeah, there's going to be some expense for that. There needs to be some painting done upstairs in some of the classroom, and there's moving costs, and we figured it was about a week's worth of labor probably for several people. Yeah.
And at this point, do you have time to go back to the Methodist Church and say, look, this is the offer we have from Trinity. We need something like that from you and to reconsider? I mean, do you feel like you still have time to negotiate with them?
I could ask them for a more, you know, I could tell them what the amount is for Trinity. I've not done that yet. I mean, I could say, you know, this is what they have asked us to pay. I feel kind of bad doing that, because I think, you know, the Lutheran Church was really gracious about offering that space, and I don't want to run people off, and I don't want people to feel like we're trying to take advantage of them. It's just that, you know, and in hindsight, I probably should have just done the repairs to the building and put them back on district property. That probably would have been the better decision. I think I screwed up. I'm going to own it in public. But I made the best decision with the information I had. And, you know, that other property is very affordable, and it serves the same purpose as the Methodist Church. But I think I could ask her that. She's been very responsive, Pastoral Warehouse.
That gets kind of a back and forth thing going on.
I guess-
Yeah, and I agree. It's awkward.
Yeah.
Super awkward.
Kim, I just appreciate kind of how you, sorry,
I'm good.
sure.
I'll chime back in if I have more to say.
I was just say, I appreciate how you led this with the student focus and the fiscal responsibility piece, and then also just looking through multiple lenses of, you know, the community aspect. And so I guess my first question is the long-term vision and what you think is probably best for students and fiscally responsible to get back on district property, because that might factor in for my recommendation. If we're thinking that eventually district property in the daycare is the best option, then maybe we have kind of this 12-month, and in the next 12 months we go for the maybe less expensive option, so that we can, you know, recoup that savings of, you know, several $1,000s.
Yeah, I think there's some complications when you're in another setting like that. I worry a bit about the traffic sometimes, you know, with our students. Those are our most vulnerable kids that need a lot of support. And so, you know, Tony and I worry about the traffic and being on a busy street. You know, when you're in the high school, you're in kind of a contained environment, even though the daycare is kind of back in the corner. It's a real quiet area. But it would require some transportation. You know, there's some transportation costs to get the kids downtown where they do their, you know, their work with the community. So I think there's pros and cons. I mean, there are other tenants inside the Methodist Church, which kind of concerns me sometimes. I mean, you know, are our kids, you know, being too noisy, or, you know, I don't know if it disturbs somebody else. I don't know. You know, they're kids, but they're great kids, so I doubt that that's the case. But I do kind of worry about that when you have other tenants in a building, and it's a kind of an uncontrolled setting, you know, where when we're in our own district property, in our own location, it is more controlled and it's more, I think it's safer for kids sometimes, so.
I'll chime in. Oh, sorry, Tom. You know.
Is it just an annual contract, year to year? Okay.
Yeah,
So here's my piece. I think, this is me guessing, that transition for these students is probably not ideal. They probably like routine. They probably are comfortable, and probably takes a bit to get these kids comfortable.
yeah, you're probably right.
Being downtown, like being here, knowing them, seeing around town, because I'm close enough, I'll see them walk by, and it's kind of fun. It makes more sense for them to be closer to be downtown and integrating with the community of which they're trying to work, and some of them do have jobs. Heck, we got one here that's awesome to see him. Fantastic. But another thing that's bugged me about this was them kind of, be just as direct as possible, them saying we had a lack of direct communication, and we have an email trail that said basically 2 months ahead of time this is going, they don't get back to us. I just kind of was disappointed by like kind of accusing our administration of like not being transparent and having communication when you guys, I feel like, have. So my opinion on this is just what I expressed. I trust you guys with every decision you have, and whatever you guys decide to do, you're going to have my support. I feel like you've probably had a lot of background communication that I'm not aware of, and so I don't think you necessarily made a mistake there, Kim. I wouldn't say that necessarily. I think it's just a very complex situation,
Yeah.
and you're doing the best you can.
Thank you for that, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I agree. To me, the stability for the students is the most important thing, I would say. I get that there's been communication trouble, and there could continue to be, hurt feelings. And I would just say make the best decision for the kids.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of people and a lot of things involved in it.
Yeah.
And it, forgot I had it on. And it's, I know it's more complicated than it even looks, and it looks complicated.
Yeah,
And,
it is.
and so I think go with what's fairest, as far as in to the kids, and makes most sense in a timely fashion so people can get on with their lives.
Okay,
Yep.
Because otherwise, we don't want to stretch things out.
yeah, we'll figure it out in the morning, Tony
So-
and I will. Okay,
Enough,
thank you.
enough direction from us?
That's enough direction, yeah.
Okay.
I will say that the bright spot of my day, every time on Tuesday is at 1 o'clock when they come through.
Yeah.
And whether I need Doritos or not, I buy them.
We all have like a drawer, like I have a drawer full of
We got a stash.
stuff every week. You're not going to tell them.
Fantastic
Oh,
prices,
right, you know.
too.
They're fun.
Yeah.
And, as Josh said, I appreciate you owning the, 20/20 hindsight's always perfect.
I know.
And I can't help but believe there would have been complications that way
Either
too,
way.
that you
Yeah.
would have regretted later. So-
Yeah.
So I don't know that, like said, necessarily made a mistake. It's just, there's
Yeah.
It's complex.
several
It
options.
is, yeah.
And none of them are clear cut, the great, this is it.
Yeah, no, they're not. I would, it would be great if, if we ever pass a bond, we can build a facility for community transition program, as part of the middle school. We can have a separate wing or something. I think that'd be really fun if they had, their own community space, their own commercial kitchen to make their cookies. And my mom waits every Tuesday night for her cookies. She knows.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay,
All
you
right.
good with anything from us on that more? Okay, budget reductions, SIA.
Yeah, just a quick update. So the legislature, they gave a tiny haircut to SIA. They really tried not to. They really tried hard to leave it completely intact, but it is going to have a slightly lower allocation. When Kim did our preliminary figures, she figures it's about $130,000 less. So we will have to figure out how to adjust that funding situation. I will say that our preliminary allocation for Title I is higher. So it has an extra $120,000 in it. So it's kind of a wash. We just want to see where they all finally roll in for real. And so I'm just kind of alerting you to just to that slight reduction. But the legislature was able to maintain most of the student investment account. And they had to, they dipped into the rainy day or they, you know, to do it. So the corporate activity tax was down, which indicates, you know, kind of an economic cooling. So that is what funds the student investment account and the high school success fund. And so we don't want those to be reduced at all. Like without those, districts in Oregon cannot function. And we made that very clear. And so I'm really appreciative to Rick Lewis, our representative, who really pushed forward and supported the district. That was really great work, him and Fred Geron. So both of them were very supportive, so that's good.
Great. That's good to hear. Safety Security Assessments, ODE.
Yeah, so ODE came in and they presented the safety and security assessment for the district, and they provided some really great information to you. So I'm going to send that to you so you can read it, and had some really great tips in it, like you know, things to do to the high school to make it more efficient. They'd like to see a person in the kiosk out front, so that was a budget reduction. They think that's a major problem in this building, and so they had some really great information. They are going to present to the admin team on August 8th and go over each building and kind of talk to them about what the low-hanging fruit is, like what can we do now that doesn't cost a lot of money to make our buildings safer and better, and maybe make sure we get all of those things in place. So there's a lot of things that are not super expensive that we can do, training and posters and reunification kits. Like we should have a big tote at the district office with a whole set of reunification supplies for every building, or any building, that we could just take to another site. So we're not digging around for a bullhorn and some of those things that we had on the slotting event. So they had really great information. And I'm using that to help me write the COPS grant if I can get it into the system. Cross your fingers.
Okay, and we put policy DBDB, the fund balance on here, and with the idea of getting some discussion to give Tony guidance for a possible re-revived adoption down the road, or if we want to leave it alone. But so I'll open it up for discussion on that, and mainly centered around the idea of right now it says 10% of the total budget. Do we want to change the percentage? Do we want to change it be the general fund and not the entire budget?
I know Derek's got something, but
Well, I think several meetings ago, we were having conversations about this specifically. My question is just around that 10%. Is that reasonable? Like, our policy talks about total adopted revenues. Do we attach that to a different, not necessarily a different revenue source, but like a different portion of the budget? And so I know there's some conversations around that. And so that was my general question. I have a specific thought in mind, but just do we need to look and maybe readjust that so it's tangible for us to actually achieve, and then also keeping us, fiscally sound?
Yeah.
Well, and I also wonder how other potential funds would affect that 10%, because I know you've talked about having a capital fund, right? Like something that, like, we're going to put money away for this, and that's going to reduce the amount for rolling over.
Yeah, correct.
So that's a wondering I have.
Yeah, to tag on
Jennifer's
point. Yeah, you were wanting to restructure how it's done, so I guess I would want to see how do you want to do it, and then make sure the policy matches the practice.
Yeah, I was thinking more of a range and not just so that you have some flexibility in it, so that it's not so, very concrete, like it has, so that it flexes with economic, changes and adjustments in the state school fund and such.
So if you look at OASBO, which is a school business official, they recommend between 3 to 8% of unreserved general fund, while you have the government accountants, who their organization is a little bit higher, but that group also includes some other local government groups. They recommend anywhere between 5 to 15%. So that one's really broad. But OASBO, which really works with school districts, they have that recommendation of around 8% is a, is a
I recall
top area.
Jackie saying like 8 to 12 or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's just minimum that
Yeah.
the numbers that OASBO, and it's even referenced in the policy, right? They actually are very transparent in saying what they recommended as a minimum.
I guess I'd like to see some sort of a trigger mechanism where if we fall below that number, we
stop
got
spending.
we got to have, well, there's that, but board action to go below it, so we take
Yeah.
control of it. We just kind of went like, well, okay, if you guys say you got it, that there needs to be more of
Yeah,
a
some
of a-
wording in there where we just suspended it.
Yeah, we just
For 2 years
yeah,
while
we did
had,
we did not follow policy.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, and what would happen is when you're working on the budget, like, we have a projected ending fund balance in our current budget that you approve through the budget committee. So, if you weren't meeting the parameters of what you thought should be in the ending fund balance, then you would have to go back to the drawing board with the budget. So during the budget process, you actually sign off technically
Right.
on what our projected ending fund balance is just
True.
recently for 25, 26. And while I think we're at around, I don't remember, $3 million, we have some cushion in there because we have a $500,000 capital reserve fund. We also have the PERS reserve. So we had some other funds that I think is what Tom's referring to, is that, I don't know if they actually, those aren't technically ending fund balance, but so I'd have to ask Jackie if those
Yeah.
count towards your percentage, because they really are like a savings account, but they're not technically ending fund balance. So that might be a good question. I don't know if Tom knows the answer to that or not.
They're seen as reserves.
Yeah.
Different time.
Yeah, so,
And unrestricted or restricted reserves are considered differently than ending balance. So those areas that are specifically delegated as part of the budget process as reserves, that part is actually protected. It's what we call an above the line,
yeah.
carve out in the budget versus what ends up being your unrestricted, fully discretional reserves.
And so you wouldn't be calculating your percentage that you're withholding, you wouldn't be including those funds from that aspect either.
No.
So that you'd be, withholding an additional ending fund balance to cover a percentage of that. But I'm wondering if, just crossed my mind, if there's any benefit in getting some input from our unions. Because what I think about, if we have let's say we adopted a range of 5 to 8%, we go into bargaining, the money in reserves, I think sometimes can be seen as, well, you can spend it on, higher salaries. And I think if I know in the past, that's been
Yes.
maybe not an explicit statement, but it's been underlying anyways. Well, you have this money, you can spend it. And obviously, if we have an adopted fixed percentage, if our unions think that 10 or 12% is too high, or 8% is too high, I just think that if they were some buy-in, that they agreed that, hey, 8% is necessary for the health of our district, we might eliminate some of that tug.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah, and it's very
because they do.
transparent about
They
what
do
it should be.
look at
And,
that.
yeah.
Yeah,
They
absolutely.
think it's just there to be had.
Yeah, because now that we have everybody was motivated together because we were broke.
Yeah.
But now that we've got, now we have an ending fund balance, everyone's going to come in with their pet project and we'll carve a little bit off for me and a little bit for that and a little bit for some weight, for weight. Everybody's important projects, but
Yeah.
but now they'll be lobbying for that,
Yeah,
So
and when we had a healthy ending fund balance, and when we had a higher student population, would be like, if you look at like 2016 and 17 and 18, like we have like a $4 to $5 million ending fund balance in those 2 years. It's really healthy. Well, I can tell you exactly what it was, because I have this PowerPoint up that Tony and I just did. And so when you look at that, I mean, I think it gives you an idea of where we've been historically, and how, you know, we need to try and get back to that. I mean, even though we're at, you know, $3 million, it's still not as high as what it should be. It should still be
No,
higher. Yeah.
But it's better than negative.
It's way better than negative.
So, I mean, I can't agree more with what Owen said, because that was in the back of my mind, just wondering the whole time about when you see these reserves, and people think, great, we can go for, you know, the raises we want, but then that drops us below our policy again, and we're not budgeting for the policy. I think if we do have our capital reserves or deferred maintenance line item, which I think we absolutely have to have, I think that could decrease our general fund balance, because typically what your reserves are for is to cover those.
Right.
But I do like it being separated, just specifically for roofs, building maintenance, stuff like that, that could lower the general fund reserve balance.
So Josh, would
Yeah.
you then support a change to being, you know, I don't care about the percent, right? But if it was 10% of the general fund instead of adopted revenues?
Yeah, I could be.
That's where I land,
Yeah.
is for it to be of the general, whatever percentage we land on for it to be of the general fund.
It's easier to understand that way.
Well, it's easier to understand, it's what we're actually, for all of us here, for practical purposes, what we're working with.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and it, a percent, and maybe tie some mechanism in that, you know, we've just been, you know, saying we're basically ignoring it, but have whatever percent, like say if 8%, but have some language in there that requires before June 30th action by the board, if it's going to be below that, to
Yep.
accept whatever it is it's going to be that year.
I agree with that.
Some wording in there to force the issue, because otherwise, well, you've seen in the past, it just kind of goes by and no one, you know, everybody can't pay attention to everything all the time.
Right.
But if you have something in there like that,
Yeah, and
then it.
Closes the dam and it forces
Yeah.
us to take
it's-
action.
Yeah.
So
and I
somebody
guess-
has to own it.
Yeah, for sure. I like that, and I guess just to go back to what Owen said about getting union,
Yeah. I
Getting
think
some
that's
input, because
the piece.
we don't want to have happen what's happened the past couple of years, last year, and the disruption to students. And my wife was part of that, where cuts happened. It had nothing to do with where you're qualified. It's just, it was down the line. And so teachers, staff were put into places where they really weren't the best at. And that's really tough. It's tough on the staff, but it's also tough on the kids.
Yeah, right.
Kids, you know, the teachers who are specialized in that room, in that class size, you know, fifth,
Setting.
you know,
Yeah.
configuration. Now they're teaching first grade.
Yeah.
And they had fifth grade dialed in, and all of a sudden they're teaching first grade, and they're not really. That's not where they're at. That's not what they're best at. That's not good for kids. It's not good for the adults either. But if it's about the kids, so we can never let that happen again. You know.
I would
so.
just add to, I totally agree, and I think that bringing up the conversation every year is a good a good idea. But and I love the idea of reaching out to the unions. I think the board will look different after this, and so the board has to be willing to take the feedback. Because if we ask and we don't actually use the feedback, that's going to not be such a great situation.
What's your concern there, exactly?
Just that people don't like it when they're asked to give feedback and then it doesn't get acted upon.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm thinking about is probably even worse, which would be, let's say, buy-in or some kind of a informal agreement that whatever the number is right. And I won't speak for Wally, but having been on the board with him in the past, I know he is going to be a strong advocate for a very conservative reserve. And Right now, while the memory is fresh in our minds, I think it's probably the best time to go and have that discussion because, everybody sees what happens when we don't maintain a reserve and what could happen. So, but yeah, that's a good point, Jennifer.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's an absolutely important, because I was thinking the same thing too, because in my district, we were in a really contentious, remember when we were almost on Strikeville here? My district was at the exact same spot, but a giant reserve. And that's not so sympathetic, right? It's like you can't really sympathize with the district when they have a gigantic reserve. And so I think making sure that the reserve is really clear, whether it's the general fund versus what we have now, and then making sure that those capital funds, those things are protected, I think are super important. And if we're going to ask for feedback, I think it's important that people are open to it, because if they say, well, we want a 5% ending fund balance and the board can't tolerate that, that's gonna, I don't know, that's not going to be a bridge building opportunity.
Piggybacking off of that, I just think that you, Tony, and Kim have done a great job of already starting that work, of being upfront and honest with them. So I think the style of leadership with the union's already been really positive, based on the contract that was already done. So I've always wanted to see this. I always hated the fighting. I came on right as it was this us, them, us, them, us, then for years of union versus the administrators and just butting heads. And it always frustrated me because we all go to the same grocery stores. We all serve the same kids. How are we not seen as being on the same team? And this is literally a team thing. We respect, I'm just, I don't have any role in any of it. I hate the fighting. I don't see it happening, so I'm ecstatic, and I'm really encouraged by the recommendation to talk to them and see what they say. So I really appreciate that, guys.
I think maybe more than, this has got me thinking, talking about how Jennifer said about not taking the feedback, acting on it, but then the importance of getting buy-in from them. And maybe just an educational thing, similar to what happened with our situation for this year and where we were at and everything. And this puts it back on you three, but educating staff of the importance, and keep that reference in mind of the unfunding balance and what it's there for and how it gets utilized, and so that you make payroll in the summer and stuff like that.
Yeah,
And the educational process, because I think you're right. I've seen it happen too. Districts, they see reserve, and if it's too outlandish, okay, I get it. But if it's one that is prudent and they see what it is for, it's not there to, cover somebody getting bigger wages. It's for the unexpected and the day-to-day and this sort of thing.
Well, we need to build that capital reserve fund so that we can, do some roofing and some different things. And I think that also shows commitment to your voters that you're being a good steward of their taxes and what they are contributing to the school district. And I think that that's really important. It's our responsibility to show voters that if you vote for a bond and you help us build a better middle school for the kids, that we will take care of it. We will take care of what is in our district, and we will maximize, those expenses that need to be taken care of on a regular basis, not leave them unattended.
But I totally agree with you, Phil. It's really hard when you're going through a negotiation and, maybe the ask for a wage increase might be steep, and the other side needs to say, well, say our projections are off, because that happens. It happened in this last thing.
Yeah, it did.
Then there's going to be cuts, and that seems like a threat.
Yeah.
And so it's a very difficult kind of thing to communicate.
It is very.
Kim, I was just going to follow up on your last point. I appreciate that because I think having the dedicated reserve for capital improvements, the roofing, and having that as a line item and separating that out is important for all the points that you mentioned as well. And then I'm curious, I went back and was looking at the different organizations. Their references are like a percentage, and it's not a hard number where ours is a hard number. And I wonder if that's because of the uncertainty of funding sources, and so it gives a little bit of flexibility. If we have something that come in shorter than what we anticipated, it still may trigger a conversation on our end. But if our range is 7 to 9% or whatever we decide to be, it gives us a little bit of flexibility, not having to just shut down the policy in its entirety.
Yeah. I mean, uncertainty on funding sources. I remember when I was first on the board, I heard stories about the funding from the state projections were way off, and they cut the funding mid-year. And as I remember Mark Hannon talking about midway through the year, giving out pink slips, layoffs in the middle of the year.
Yeah.
And a healthy reserve fund can mitigate that.
2008, that's the year that happened.
Yeah.
And I think that, the resources are unpredictable sometimes. So like we had a FEMA, insurance claim basically for the ice storm that we put in I think it was 2021, and it just arrived 2 weeks ago. It took 4 years. Kim got a check for $300 and some thousand.
Very nice.
Right?
Put it in the
It's
reserves.
there.
So I was on the last long range, Kim, and bond advisory, and we did a bunch of listening sessions. I'm going to tell you one of the things that the hot button was they were mad that we didn't have a deferred maintenance. It kept getting brought up and brought up, and they
Yeah.
thought we mismanaged our money.
Yeah, it continually comes up.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, love it. I almost like you were there or read the reports.
I read the report.
Okay.
All of it.
Yeah. So, yeah,
So,
that's it.
okay, well, thank you.
So is this something
Okay.
down the road, Phil, that we're going to need to possibly make an action item, like put it on a?
Well, Vince, what I'm thinking, have we given the two of you enough information of working with some things and building, and then
Yeah, I think
just
so.
do the normal policy process? But I felt this was something we should discuss and kind of give you a direction of what we were thinking beforehand.
Yeah, I
Is
think
that-
we have good direction.
So,
Clear. Meet with the unions. And,
okay, and then we'll just go through the regular policy.
Okay,
Good
Business.
discussion.
thank you.
Yeah. Okay, this is our public comment time. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand to be recognized by the board chair. If attending remotely, please use the raise hand feature within Zoom. For the record, please provide your name and relationship to district. Please keep individual remarks to 3 minutes. If speaking as a representative on behalf of a group of 3 or more, comment time will be extended to 5 minutes. The board will not hear complaints against individual district staff or board members. This time is reserved in this meeting for discussion items and board action items on tonight's agenda. Do we have anyone here? Do we have anyone online?
I don't see any hands raised online right now.
Okay. And moving on, our action items. Adoption of the collective bargaining agreement.
I move that we-
Entertain a motion.
I move that we would adopt the 2025-2026 SFEA collective bargaining agreement.
Second?
It's been moved and second to approve the 2025-26 SFSD SFEA collective bargaining agreement. Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passed unanimously. Bethany Charter School contract. Entertain a motion on it.
I move to approve the 2025 through 2030 Bethany Charter School contract.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to approve the 2025 through 2030 Bethany Charter School contract. Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay? Passed unanimously.
So I move to approve the 2025-2030 Community Roots Charter School contract.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the 2025-30 Community Roots Charter School contract. Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passed unanimously. And then we have the final reads on our policies. And
I move to adopt the policies listed for third reads.
Second?
it's been moved and second to adopt the policies that are listed on third reads tonight's agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passed unanimously.
Well, Jennifer.
Only thing left to say is thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Owen, for
Yeah.
your service to
Yeah,
the district.
thank you.
Yeah.
Wish you guys luck. You've been a pleasure to work with, all of you, and Aaron as well. Really appreciate
Yeah,
y'all.
great team.
And you guys too.
Yeah, I'll take you guys out to dinner when Aaron gets back.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
Thank you so
we'll go-
much. That'd be
yeah,
wonderful.
We'll go meet at OSO or something.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
I don't remember if I said anything last time, but man, I learned a lot from you guys. You guys were great. So don't be a stranger, please.
Just,
Might call you if I have problems.
of course. Just pay it forward. Grow the next crop up. That's what we got to do.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Okay. We're adjourned.
Yay.